Now, let's explore the income and expense adjustments tab. During the assumption stage, this is going to be the most important tab as all of our information flows through here. Our main goal here is to create the NOI, or the net cash flow at the end, and to create the underwriting column. This tab is divided into two sections, the income section and the expenses section. Up here in the Compare dropdown, we can choose which files we would like to compare in our analysis. By default, we have the T12 selected, but we can add more periods to our selection. We can choose any of the historical files, the annualized T12, different periods such as the T3 or T6. In our example, we can also include the Freddie Mac underwriting column for comparison as well. Now we can go up here to the Trend By dropdown, similar to the one we had in the Rent Roll tab, and we can choose to display a different category of variance for our comparison. We can trend by time or compare time by threshold. Let's stick with trend by time. Now let's add more columns in the Compare dropdown, historical files, to see the difference in the percentages over time. Next, since our main focus on this tab is to create the NOI, let's begin to underwrite in the underwriting column. If you look on the right, by default, we have an automatic calculation based on the T12. We can see the comments over on the right-hand side. You can give an explanation for the default underwriting in terms of both the income and the expenses. Now let's focus on the metrics we want to look at. This dropdown allows us to change from per unit per year to per unit per month, or total per month, or total per year. Once we have chosen a specific metric we want to look at, we can then change these values below manually. Let's input some values so we can get a sense for how this column works. Let's change our total laundry from 99 to 120. Now another important feature we have is an ability to view and change the values for the subcategories in either the income or expense. We have two ways to edit in the underwriting column. We can either expand it to subcategories and change each one respectively, or we can collapse the subcategories and change the total. Let's go ahead and change the values in a subcategory. If we look down below in our operating expenses and click on the Expand button next to Total Repairs and Maintenance, let's go ahead and change the value of our pest control expense from 32 to 40. And then above, the total will change accordingly. Another important feature in the income section is our economic vacancy feature. We know the gross potential rent is coming from the rent roll itself, and in this section, we can use the collection analysis formula that Northmark uses. First, start by pressing on economic vacancy, press on edit, and then we have the option to either write it manually or use one of the periods based on the Northmark collection formula. In this example, because we can see an increase of the T3 compared to the T12 and the T6, we're going to choose the Northmark collection, and then the collection figure will be shown under the net rental income, and the rental loss will be shown under economic vacancy. Now, let's underwrite in the operating expenses section. In the same way that we can edit in the income section, we can edit in both the subcategories and the totals. There are a few things to note about the values in this section. First, let's look at our taxes. These values are being automatically taken from our Taxes tab. So let's go over to the Taxes tab to better understand how to modify these values. In this tab, we have the tax information that we collected from Cherry and the last tax report from the property. If we're talking about an acquisition, let's go ahead and click this checkbox here next to Reassess upon acquisition, and it will adjust the taxes automatically. However, if you would like to change it manually, you can go down below and click on Adjusted Total Tax Due and input the value on our own. Either way, whatever value we have on our total tax due will flow into our expenses section back in the Income and Expense Adjustment tab. We can see here that the taxes were changed. Now the rest of the values in the underwriting column were automatically calculated, and you can see the specific calculation that was used in the comments column. If we want to change these values manually, we can still do so, exactly like we did in the income section. We can either change the values in the subcategories or the values in the totals. If we continue down our list of values, we can see there is a property management fee, and by default it is 3%, which we can change. Next, we have our capital reserves per unit. By default, the value is $250 per unit, which we can change as well. Once we press apply to all the values and we input into our capital reserve, it will show the expense in all the historical files in order to better compare them with each other. One last thing, if you would like to change our views of the values from percentage of total expenses, we can change that in the following dropdown and see the expenses as a ratio of GPR instead. Now that we know how to underwrite and change values in our Incomes and Expenses tab, let's move on to the Comparables tab.